Probably watched a true crime documentary. Maybe late at night, unable to look away. You wanted to know who did it. You wanted to know why. You told yourself you'd watch just one more episode, and then somehow it was 2 in the morning. That pull you feel, the need to solve it, is not new. It's not even close to new. But the real answer is far stranger than you think. The very first murder investigation in human history didn't happen in a courtroom. It didn't happen with detectives or fingerprints or witness statements. It happened 430,000 years ago, at the bottom of a cave, in the dark. And it wasn't solved until scientists, armed with modern forensic tools, finally climbed down to look. So who was the first murder victim ever identified? And how, after nearly 500,000 years, could anyone possibly prove it was murder at all? In the mountains of northern Spain, buried deep inside the Atapuerca hills, there's a cave system called Cima de los Huesos. The name means pit of bones, and that is exactly what it is. A vertical shaft plunging nearly 15 meters straight down into the earth, so narrow and so treacherous that reaching the bottom today requires ropes, headlamps, climbing gear, and a fair amount of nerve. Researchers have described the descent as claustrophobic, even with modern equipment. Now imagine making that same descent with nothing but fire. At the bottom of that pit, researchers found bones, thousands of them, fragments, skulls, teeth, jawbones, pelvises, all mixed together in the dark, belonging to at least 28 individuals, all of them ancient relatives of modern humans, a species known as Homo heidelbergensis, believed by many scientists to be ancestors of the Neanderthals. These weren't modern humans. Homo sapiens hadn't evolved yet, and yet here, in this narrow shaft, was evidence of behavior far more complex than anyone expected from a species this ancient. For years, paleoanthropologists debated a strange question: how did all these bodies end up at the bottom of a pit no living animal could have simply wandered into? The pit had no other entrance at the time these individuals died. There was no way to accidentally fall in. So either something dragged 28 bodies down a near vertical shaft one at a time over generations, or something else was happening. In 2015, a team led by researcher Noemi Sala published a study that changed everything. Sala and her colleagues, including renowned paleoanthropologist Juan Luis Arzuaga, focused on one skull in particular, cataloged simply as Cranium 17. Cranium 17 had 2 fractures on its forehead, just above the left eye. At first glance, this might seem unremarkable. Ancient skulls are often damaged. Rockfalls, animal activity, millennia of pressure from the earth above. Injuries happen to bones long after their owners have died. But Sala's team used something modern forensic scientists still use today: trauma analysis, and what they found stopped the debate cold. Both fractures on Cranium 17 were nearly identical in shape and size. Both were located in almost exactly the same spot, clustered so closely that a natural, accidental cause became difficult to justify. And critically, using CT scanning and microscopic imaging techniques borrowed directly from modern forensic pathology, the researchers determined the 2 blows came from 2 separate impacts delivered by the same object in quick succession before the individual died. There was no sign of healing around either wound. Whatever happened, happened fast, and it happened right before death, not sometime long before it. Think about what that means. This wasn't erosion, worn down by 500,000 years underground. This wasn't a rock fall or the bite marks of a cave predator, both of which leave very different, very recognizable patterns on bone. This was 2 direct hits to the same precise location on a person's skull, likely delivered by another human being using a weapon. In the language of modern forensics, this pattern has a name: overkill. It's the signature investigators look for when violence goes beyond what would be needed to simply stop someone. A single blow can incapacitate. A second blow aimed at the exact same spot suggests intent. It suggests rage or determination or both, and it is difficult to explain any other way. For the first time, science had identified something researchers were willing to call, with real confidence, a murder. 430,000 years before the invention of writing, long before agriculture, long before anything resembling a city, a law, or a courtroom existed anywhere on Earth. But here is where the story becomes even stranger. If this individual was murdered, why was the body then carried or dragged or dropped down a treacherous vertical shaft 15 meters into total darkness at a time when carrying a torch into a pitch-black cave itself was an enormous risk. That single detail changes the entire picture. This wasn't simply an act of aggression. It may have been followed by an act of ritual, of grief, of some early form of respect for the dead that predates every religion, every funeral rite, every gravestone humans have ever created. Researchers on the excavation team have even pointed to a single object recovered from the pit, a beautifully crafted pink quartzite hand axe, nicknamed Excalibur by the team, found among the bones despite having no practical use down there. No one needs a finely made tool at the bottom of an inaccessible shaft. Some researchers believe it may have been placed there deliberately, an offering left with the dead. Anthropologist Ian Tattersall has argued that behaviors like deliberate burial suggest something profound about the cognitive world of these early humans, a concept of death as meaningful, a recognition that a life had ended and that ending deserved acknowledgement rather than simple abandonment. If Cima de los Huesos truly was a burial site, and not every researcher agrees that it was, it means that alongside humanity's capacity for violence, there existed, at the very same moment, in the very same population, a capacity for something like mourning. Two instincts sitting inside the same species 430,000 years before anyone would ever write a word about either of them. Murder and grief sitting side by side 430,000 years ago. Why does any of this matter to you? Because the impulse that made you want to know who did it and why while watching that documentary is not a modern invention. Psychologist Steven Pinker, who has spent decades studying the history of violence, argues that human beings carry deeply wired systems for detecting threat, tracking wrongdoing, and craving justice when that wrongdoing goes unpunished. These systems didn't appear alongside police departments or courts of law. They appear to be built into the basic architecture of how you process the world. Cranium-17 sat undiscovered and unsolved for nearly 500,000 years, longer than the species that killed him has even existed in its current form. And yet, here, a set of researchers spent years building a case, gathering evidence, testing theories, running the fractures through statistical models, refusing to let the question go unanswered. That refusal to let a death go unexplained, that drive to reconstruct exactly what happened to a stranger you will never meet, who lived and died before recorded history even began, before anyone had a name for right and wrong, that is not scientific curiosity alone. It's something older, something almost identical to what pulls you toward a true crime story at 11 at night when you know you should be asleep, or what makes a courtroom go silent the moment a verdict is about to be read. Your brain doesn't distinguish much between a victim from last year and a victim from 430,000 years ago. Both trigger the same circuitry, the same need for resolution, the same discomfort with an unanswered question about harm done to another person. Researchers who study moral psychology sometimes call this a justice instinct, and it appears to activate whether the case in front of you is a headline from this morning or a fractured skull pulled from a cave floor. There's a deeper twist here too. For most of the 20th century, the earliest humans were often imagined as simple, almost incapable of complex thought or emotion, let alone something as layered as an act of violence followed by an act of care. Textbooks describe them in blunt terms: brutish, instinct-driven, barely distinguishable from the animals around them. Cranium-17 quietly dismantles that assumption piece by piece. These weren't simple creatures acting on raw instinct alone. They planned, they carried objects with intention, they responded to death in a way that required memory, social bonds, and something resembling shared meaning among the group. They were capable of the same tangled, contradictory range of behavior you see in humans today: anger sharp enough to kill in a single, targeted, repeated motion, and tenderness deep enough to carry that same body 15 meters down into total darkness so it would not be left exposed to the world above, to scavengers, to the elements, to indifference. Two extremes of the exact same species, expressed within what may have been days of each other, sealed together in one narrow shaft for nearly 500,000 years. So who was the first murder victim in human history? We will likely never know their name, their voice, their face, or the argument, if there even was one, that led to those two blows above the left eye. We only know the two marks left on their skull and the improbable distance their body traveled afterwards into a pit that would keep their story sealed for nearly 500,000 years, until a small team with headlamps and forensic training finally climbed down into the dark and asked the right question. No trial ever happened, no sentence was ever handed down. Whoever delivered those 2 blows lived out the rest of their life, 430,000 years ago, completely unaccountable, in a world with no concept of guilt in the legal sense at all. And yet, here you are, watching a video about it, wanting to know more, unable to simply let a case this old go unresolved. That says something about you. It says something about every person who has ever stayed up too late finishing one more episode, unable to sleep until the question is answered. You've probably watched a true crime documentary, wanting to know who did it and why. Now you know the very first case like it wasn't solved by police, it was solved by scientists in a cave, 430,000 years too late to save anyone, but just in time to tell you that the questions you ask about violence and grief are as old as humanity itself, and they were never really about the courtroom to begin with. They were about you, and the part of you that has never once been able to walk away from an unanswered question about another person's pain.